Hello everyone, I'm Terry Duke, and this is the third part in my Bannerlord for Newbies series, where I aim to explain the many facets of Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord as simply as possible. So far we've covered the leveling system and the world map, but of course the coolest part about the game is the fighting part, and while sticking the pointy end at the enemy is generally a good approach, Bannerlord offers a wide range of weapons, each with their pros and cons. So in this video, I aim to explain how fighting works, describe all types of weapons, their pros and cons, as well as give general tips for fighting in different scenarios. So let's do this, starting with how the fighting gameplay works. In Bannerlord, the fighting gameplay is pretty straightforward once you get it. Basically, melee weapons function by directional attacks. In whatever direction you move the camera as you make an attack or a block, this is the direction it will be performed from. So you can either swing left, right, upward, or forward, depending on the type of weapon. Enemies work the same way, so you have a fraction of a second to guess where the next attack will come from, so if you block in the same direction, you won't receive any damage, but if you block in the wrong direction, the hit will land. If you need help understanding the mechanic, the game comes with an option to show directional arrows. The arrow that is highlighted shows the direction from which you will attack or block, so it's pretty simple. So knowing that, which weapons are the best in the game? Bannerlord has 6 types of weapons divided into 2 categories, melee and ranged. Melee weapons comprise one-handed weapons, which are daggers, swords, maces, and axes, which can all be used with a shield. Two-handed weapons will include large swords, maces, and axes, and obviously can't be used with a shield. Polearms include spears, lances, and pikes, as well as halberds. They can all be used with shields, though they can be used two-handed as well. Ranged weapons include bows, crossbows, and a variety of throwing weapons, such as javelins, throwing axes, and daggers. Regarding melee weapons, I would say for any beginners, I would recommend you stick to a one-handed sword to use with a shield. While the shield can be used in several directions, it's generally so large that even blocking in the wrong direction will still block attacks. The moment you use a two-handed weapon, you risk getting hit by blocking in the wrong direction, and you've made yourself completely vulnerable to ranged attacks. That said, even within categories, weapon types come with pros and cons, so let's talk about each weapon type, their strengths and weaknesses. Starting with one-handed weapons, we have the dagger. The only advantage of daggers is they are fast. No joke, they can be the fastest weapons in the game. However, for that speed, you will trade a lot. The daggers are too small to block, so if your shield is destroyed, you won't be able to block attacks with a dagger. They are also much shorter, obviously, so you need to get real close to your opponent to land a strike. And overall, the damage is still pretty average. Swords are as straightforward as it gets. They can both cut and thrust, generally, making them useful weapons for any scenario. There are no serious advantages or disadvantages here. Axes, on the other hand, are designed to deliver heavier blows but at the cost of handling, meaning they are stronger but slower. They also have bonus damage against shields, so if you're looking to cut your way through enemy shield walls, axes can help with that. However, they also tend to be shorter than swords, meaning you have to get closer. Maces work much in the same way, the big difference being the type of damage delivered. And it's actually as good a time as any to explain damage types: cutting, piercing, and blunt. Cutting refers to any type of slashing damage with the blade, such as with swords and axes. Piercing can refer to thrusting damage, such as with a sword and a spear, as well as arrows, while blunt is exclusively done by maces. And the big advantage offered by maces is that blunt damage does not kill opponents. Any opponents wounded in battle but not killed can be captured afterwards to either recruit them to your party or ransom them in taverns for money. So if you're looking to get prisoners, maces will always be the way to go. Whether you're talking about two-handed sword, mace, or axe, they all enhance the pros and cons of their smaller counterparts by being much bigger. So a two-handed axe will wreak havoc on shields and enemies alike, but be noticeably slower. Two-handed mace will be slow as well, but will knock enemies out even better. And the two-handed swords will overall be a dangerous cutting weapon with more reach, and that's about it. So all two-handed weapons are more devastating, but will make you more vulnerable to attacks, especially ranged ones. In polearms, let's start with the spear. The biggest advantage of spears is obviously their reach. They make it much easier to attack enemies from a safe distance, however if the enemy gets close enough to strike, it becomes much more difficult to use. However, using a spear while on horseback is an excellent way to charge down enemies and quickly retreat before they can strike back. Pikes are much longer than spears, but they can only be used with two hands on foot. You cannot be on a horse with a pike. However, pikes are very effective against cavalry. You have the option to brace the pike, and if well aimed, the cavalry will simply impale themselves on it. Then we have the lance, which is a spear optimized for cavalry with the option to couch. Couching the lance means you will tilt it down as you charge down enemies, and it will basically kill anything in its path. The disadvantage of couching is you have much less control over your horse while you're doing it, and you're still vulnerable to ranged attacks. And that leaves us with the halberd, which is basically a spear-axe mashup. Essentially, halberds are two-handed axe with even more range, more devastating power, but even slower. So to recap, these are the ideal weapons based on your skill level and the scenario in which you're using them. When it comes to ranged weapons, you will often notice that some weapons cannot be equipped until you reach a certain skill level with them. So to get the most out of ranged weapons, that often means starting with low quality bows, for example, and working your way up. In that sense, there aren't different types of bows with pros and cons, but low quality and high quality ones. The bow is pretty straightforward. Its main disadvantage is that it takes time to make the most of it. Initially, bows will be slow to reload and a bit inaccurate, but the more you use them, the more powerful they get. The crossbow's main difference is that it trades a faster firing rate for precision. Crossbows take longer to reload, and before leveling up your skills, if you're using a crossbow on foot, you cannot walk and reload at the same time, which isn't ideal on a fast-moving battlefield. The main advantage of crossbows over bows is that you can keep your aim on for much longer. When it comes to throwing weapons, there's a variety, but they all work the same. Throwing daggers aren't particularly useful in battle, but they can be equipped for your civilian clothes, making them useful weapons in the occasional street fight in towns. We then have throwing axes, which are pretty strong, but harder to aim properly. The main advantage of throwing weapons is that they are fairly easy to use all around, but the main disadvantage is that they don't come in big stacks. Typically, you have 3 to 5 throwing items, and that's it, whereas bows can carry well over 20 arrows and crossbows up to 15 bolts. As to which ranged weapon is best, I'd say the bow, because it's the only weapon that is very versatile in all combat situations. For instance, if you're attacking a castle, throwing weapons just aren't that efficient. And while the crossbow can do a bit more damage, it always needs more time to reload, and being able to aim for a long time is quickly matched by an ever-improving archer. So overall, the bow is best for speed and reliability, while the throwing weapons are good for devastating but short skirmishes with the enemy. Now I want to share some fighting tips, but obviously in this video it's about fighting alone. For fighting with a warband and all the tactics that come with that, it will be in another video. Generally, especially in early game, you may want to travel the map a bit without recruiting troops while you make some money, but inevitably you will come across bandits. So the first learning tip is the most important. Never be on foot. Always have a horse, as most bandits are on foot, and while you may not escape the battle itself, having the speed of a horse means you can keep a safe distance between you and the bandits. Then, use a spear when fighting them, not a sword. This is all about reach. Because you're alone against several opponents, you need to wear them down slowly and avoid as many hits as possible. If you got in with a sword, you are as much likely to hit them as they are to hit you, but with a spear, you can thrust at them while keeping a safe distance. So basically, use the horse to dance around the bandits, and whenever you see an opening, go for the thrust. And again, should you find yourself on foot, fight with a shield, you'll be far less likely to get hit. When fighting against a single enemy, you can stagger them with a kick or shield bash. Press E to kick, or if you have a shield, hold the block button, then press E. While these don't do much damage, they can throw the enemy off balance in time for you to land a blow, so that can be very useful. You can also use the alternate fighting mode of certain weapons by pressing X. So to brace your bike against a charge, press X. To couch a lance before a charge, press X. And you can also use X to use throwing weapons as melee weapons. So if you find yourself too close to an enemy, you can use your throwing axe as a melee weapon before switching back to throwing mode and landing it in someone's face. When using projectiles on the battlefield, keep an eye out for dead archers as they leave their quivers behind, which you can grab to reload. In fact, many weapons left on the ground can be picked up, so if say your shield breaks, pick another one. You lose your horse, grab another one. And last tip, when choosing weapons to equip in the inventory, pay attention to any symbols under the weapon. If you're looking for a spear you can couch, it will be indicated. If weapons can't be used while mounted, it will also point it out. So keep that in mind, as if you're expecting a weapon to have a certain feature, you can actually look at it before you equip it in battle. But anyway, thanks for watching everyone. After looking at the weapons and how to fight in the game, in part 4 we will look at the warband mechanics and how to lead your own warband. So if you found this video helpful and would like to know more, you know what to do. So thanks again, and I'll see you next time.